Hi, HR Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Today, we're joined by Michele Bousquet, who's the Chief People Officer at Strava. Welcome, Michele. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. How are you, Chris?
Not too bad. Where are you tuning in from? Are you at home? You're at the office? Same place. Same place in this day and age, to be honest.
Yeah, that's right. I'm in my tiny kitchen in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Love it. Oh, I love the wallpaper, by the way.
Thank you.
For those that can't listen on the podcast, Michele has great wallpaper. So,
thanks to my loyal husband who puts up wallpaper when I ask.
That's one thing about lockdown. I've been roped into a million tasks at home, and I thought is it just me, or like my wife's like, now it's the time to repaint the whole house, do all of those DIY jobs that I've been avoiding, but now I've got no excuses because I'm at home. So yeah, I've learned a lot.
Yeah. Especially in the first few weeks of quarantine or lockdown, you'd drive down the street. Everyone's lawn was beautiful. Everyone's yard is like really, really nice because they don't have anything else to do.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we've sort of exited that phase now. It's like we're sort of bored with all those initial peppy projects that we had planned. We've done them, and now it's just like the big beastly projects. So now we're not doing any.
Yeah, well, my wife took it to the extreme and said, actually, I think we want to move out. So I was like, wait a minute, we've just done all of this work. She's like, yeah, but it'll help us sell it. So she's got a point there. I think being cooped up in an apartment during this time has given me a new outlook, thinking we need space, especially for our little one, Robin. But before we jump in any further, tell everyone a little bit about yourself personally and your journey to where we are today at Strava.
How much detail do you want on the journey? It's been kind of a long one.
Yeah, go for it.
Free form. And we'll be talking in 3 hours. You're giving me like the cutoff sign. Let's see. So I'm currently the Chief People Officer at Strava, which is a software company, if you're not familiar, for athletes. We call everyone who is on our platform an athlete, and Strava has become the world's largest platform for athletes. So it's just, if you don't know with it, it's a fitness tracker essentially where you can build community with other people doing really cool stuff. So as Chris's partner knows, who's on Strava and fairly obsessed, Shane.
Michele and Shane, my business partner, always making me feel bad. It does hold you accountable when you've got a lot of friends and colleagues on there. So that's one amazing thing about it. Even though you're all the way over the other side of the world, Michele, you're getting Shane to get out of bed and run in the morning because he's like, I can't not do it.
I love it. And it's had that impact on a lot of people and on me personally. My journey to Strava was kind of winding. Like most people I've met who are in HR or people related fields, I don't think anyone talks in college really about these fields. Everyone you meet is like, I kind of fell into it. Yeah, totally. You should be a business major. No, I graduated college and I declared like vehemently that I would never work in corporate America. I thought it was, a soulless way to spend your life. And then I got my first job about 2 weeks later working at Charles Schwab, a huge financial institution, because I needed to pay the rent. And because at that point, both of my sisters who I was living with, my brother-in-law, everybody was working at Schwab. And so I got a job there and it was a great starting point for me. I worked in executive recruiting. Again, just completely fell in there. That was the job that was available. It was a supporting role and learned got my feet wet in HR. From there, I had an opportunity to actually live in the UK. And it was because of a relationship, as all good life decisions are. I had the opportunity to move overseas with the boyfriend at the time and be a stay-at-home girlfriend and see if that suited me.
Were your friends and parents thrilled with that idea?
Oh yeah. Sound decision making. I mean, at the time it was like, this is so boring to work in an office every day, 5 days a week. Like I really liked aspects of my job, but I just felt like, is this what life is about? And so I went and tried to kind of find myself a little bit. And I came back to a really different economy in the early 2000s and back in the Bay Area where it had just been booming and, a job a minute, it was really challenging to get work. And I ended up taking the job that was available in architectural engineering. And I worked in project management and I had my own hard hat and it was a small company and it was scrappy. And I think I've sort of watched others around me and had a set of, I think, core beliefs that have guided me throughout my career. and watched others for like, what are they doing? Who are the people I admire? And a couple of things that they were doing, which applied then, was when opportunities are presented to you, even if you're not sure you can do them, just say yes anyway. And through a ton of like passion and care and connection with other people, people will be drawn to you and opportunities will be drawn to you. And I think that was I spent another few years there, decided like I sort of fell into this, and now that I can be a bit more deliberate, I don't really want to. So another sound decision was talking to my best friend who had just moved to the Bay Area, and she's like, whatever the next job that opens up at this place is, I'm referring you so we can work together. And so the next job was EA to the CEO at this at a financial services firm, and didn't know how to do that, did that anyway, and ended up spending almost 10 years at this company. Wow. And leaving as chief of staff, head of people, and a member of the management team, leading and guiding that company. And so it was a really meaningful experience, and just kind of evidence again of the say yes, be interested in other people above being interested in yourself. And doors will continue to open, opportunities will be open. And I think this skill that I had always known I had became valuable in a way that I hadn't really valued it myself before, which was I can listen to you. I can understand how I might be helpful to you. I can understand what you're saying and like connect dots from other things that I hear other people are saying. And I can be a mirror like back to you so that you can be more effective. And I think that it was something I've been doing all my life, right? Being there for people, which I never thought was actually a business skill. I thought that was, they used to call it the soft skills.
It's a skill, right? And now it's the hard skill.
That's right. You're right. I'm sure you talk about this on your podcast, but I still think it's funny because we really don't use that term anymore. But when people say like, what about their soft skills? I'm like, soft skills are the skills. Like all the other stuff, exactly. Business schools are filled with people who have the other skills. Guess what? Like those aren't the people that become impactful leaders. They just aren't. So call them the soft skills or not, but it was through that tenure, again, at an asset management firm called Forward, which I just loved. I loved my time there. I loved co-creating, talking about culture for the first time. Like they'd never talked about things like that. And so I spent that journey there. I also want to say that journey was an arc of like finding who I was as a leader, and really approached like the beginning of my career. Again, you're more junior and you think, you look around to like signals of what is everyone else doing and how are they acting? And then like, I'm going to act that way too. I guess that's how you act when you work here. And
everyone does.
Yeah. Right. And I think that, also I find that way of acting very draining. Like to be a different version of yourself.
Yep.
Right. So, it's very draining. It's exhausting. It's also just weird, like I say this, like only in work are we like, I need to connect with some people and like spend some time with them. Let's go into this tiny stuffy room. Let's all stare at a screen the entire time and like never talk to each other about who we are at all. Let's just like stare at this screen. And that style of like, why aren't we learning from what makes life meaningful outside of work and bringing that in? It was just like a huge question. And I think that through my time at Forward, it was, instead of looking to everybody else, it was sort of like, can I be that? Can I start to be a person that introduces more humanity, that thinks about being authentic, that shows up in a way that allows others space to do the same? And so it wasn't always a smooth journey, but I'll say, ended up leaving there and taking a role at GoPro, which was just a fantastic experience. I loved that role. I loved my team. It was like that role, if I was on my way to figuring out who I was, that role showed me who I was.
Am I right in saying you was head of organizational development, or did I just make that
That's
up?
right.
Okay.
No, that's right. That's right.
I remember, yeah.
Which, again, was just I'm not sure I can do that. I'm not sure I can go to this, global company, do it anyway. And I had it's always about who connected you along the way, right? I had come into contact with a couple of really powerful people who have continued to be powerful for me. But one of them was the head of HR at the time, Jeff Ryan. He's now chief people officer at Zynga. But Jeff said to me when I was interviewing, I said, I don't really see myself as an HR person, just so you know. Like I've gone through that.
The best thing you could have said.
I know. And he said, he said, I get that. Why don't you just come here and do what you think needs to be done? Like, see where you think you can add the value. We'll put it on the people team and let's check in a little while and see if it worked for you. And
what a great thing to do as a leader. Like, it's so unheard of, because we're so like, we're always after this perfect match. I was even saying to my friend yesterday, he was like, oh, I'm not going to apply for this role because it doesn't, all of these bullet points and all these things that they don't match everything I do. I'm like, just that's not the reality of it, to be honest. And there's much more to that as well. And which is why I've always just applied to roles that I'm interested in, wherever I have the degree or the MBA, which I've never had, or sometimes even the experience as well. So it's really cool.
Yeah.
He saw that.
I don't have it either. I don't have it either. I believe today that I've gotten an on-the-job MBA.
Same but 18 years old. I've been going in that way. What's really stood out to me with your experiences, and I see it in so many other successful HR people, professionals, HR, don't like to use the word HR anymore, even though, you've tasted loads of things. You've tasted what it's like to work in a large corporate finance company when you first start. You've tasted the startup life. You've been in multiple roles. I can only imagine the wealth of knowledge and experience you would gain as an EA to a CEO. I can only, that you probably at the time didn't realize how value that could have been, being exposed to all of that information. So no wonder you don't see yourself as a HR person in the traditional context is what I'm talking about. And I'm sure you're the same, right? Traditional context of what HR is. And one of the things that you said when we first spoke, which I'd love to delve into, is talking about bringing back the human. And I think now more than ever, COVID has accelerated that, and actually now given everyone permission almost to there's literally no longer barrier between work and home. Before it was just a metaphor. Now there's, exactly. So it's just, and even to the point where I don't think in a few years from now, even a year from now, we would even use the word work from home. It's just work. Remote
or live at work.
Exactly. Like there shouldn't be a remote or, working from home. That language, I'm working. The value of what I do is the value I give to the customer. It doesn't matter where I am in order to do that, right? So I think we have to get over that part too. But tell me about that. When you say bring back the human, what do you mean by that? Because I saw that on your LinkedIn profile.
Oh yeah, it means a lot in many different ways. So I'll just kind of like share a few ways to me. Yeah. Sort of goes back to that, what I was talking about with the persona that people would put on. You would realize, like, I don't know, working with people, I believe first and foremost is a form of love and a loving relationship. Like you grow to love people that you spend this time with. And it's different than the way you might love your husband or the way you might love your kids or a friend, but it is genuinely that. It's the feeling of like, I leave a conversation with you and like my heart feels full and I appreciate you as a human being. And so that's a baseline for how do I view the workplace. I can tell you that it wasn't always there. Actually, when I was at Forward once, I went to a very small group, kind of like networking invite dinner, and there were eight or 10 people around the table, and two of them worked together. One was a founder and one was a CFO, and they were telling a story about how they were on a business trip together and they left each other at the airport, and one of them was like, and then I'm screaming through the gate, like, I love you, Chris. And the other guy's like, I love you, Tom. And it was like, unlike anything I had heard in the workplace. I couldn't believe this founder and the CFO were like using those words, talking to each other like that, because it was something that I had always like hinted at or felt in my gut, like, oh, I really care about these people, like in a very deep way. But nobody was saying words like that. They were all keeping it very business-like. And by the way,
would you? Yeah.
Right. It's like those are not words. We reference a policy. We think about like, and by the way, I was wearing nylons every day and like a suit. And so it just, so when they planted a seed though, for me, it was like, could that be like, could you use those words? Could you aspire to that? Another example is we would do offsites at this like nonprofit outdoor place where they would run kids camps, like 6th grade camp, and now nature education camp, which is a thing that they do here in California. And And I remember walking by like the business office of this nonprofit, and there were sticky notes all over the place, which were essentially like affirmations or validations, like, Chris, I so appreciate like how you nailed that. Da, 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 da. Same thing. I was like, we don't do that. Like in my state at that point where I was maybe 5 years in, we don't do that. Like we might say, thanks for the project, job well done.
Yeah,
but the things that worked when you were in 6th grade and you went to camp and you were like, oh, that feels good, that'd be appreciated. And anyway, those were just these little seeds that were planted of like, how might I bring more of what makes life into this place where I'm spending so much time with these people? So what it means to me is showing up with a lot of, again, now it sounds like it's manufactured. So I'll use the term authenticity, but it's not like guys, I'm showing up with authenticity today. It's been a progression over the last, 10 years probably, of getting closer and closer to like an integrated version of who I am. So the today me is like the same me, in my personal life and my kids, it's all basically the same version. And so the human is like in any situation, right? In our people roles, you're always presented, people are challenging, people are infinitely interesting. Whatever problem or situation they may come with, it's the very first question is like, okay, I've heard you. So what would people do? Like, what would people do in this situation? Not what would our policy dictate or what was the precedent that we set like a week from last Thursday and what are the legal ramifications? But the first starting point is like, what would be the right thing to do to listen and have heard this human being and think about all the variables in play? And in that way, we start with some kind of an ideal, and then we see what we can do, with all. Yeah. And yeah, so those are just a few, I think being real. Even I'll share one more anecdote, which is when I started at Strava, one thing I don't think you and I have talked about, Chris, but is we've had 4 children and one of our daughters passed away. And so there's always, for anybody who's lost a child, there's always this awkward question of like, how many kids do you have? And you always have this thud of like, I feel like you I can't hear my daughter and she's like, oh, thanks a lot. You have 3 kids. Like, what about me? And so we live in like, problematic culture in terms of how do you talk about that? And so the way that I do usually is I normalize it and I say I have 4 children, 3 of them are living. Or if there's an opportunity to introduce like who are the children in my life, I acknowledge her as someone who lived a full life and was here and changed me. And so when I started at Strava, they make you do this really painful thing of like on your first week, stand in front of the entire company and give them like a 20-minute talk about who you are. Super embarrassing. Wow. You don't know anybody.
That's quite intense for a first.
Yeah. They only do it to the management team. But,
okay.
But so I was like, here I am joining this company. I don't know these people. And I need to introduce myself. And one of the key things you should know about me is that I had this amazing daughter and she's not here anymore. And it's part of who I am. And so as I was just going through my children, I said, it's this one and this one. And I would show big pictures of them. And then I talked about Cora and so on. And I think it's an example of like, because after the presentation, I got a ton of feedback from our employees just saying like, hey, that was a really human thing to do. Or like, that was, thanks for showing us who you are. Like
the vulnerability, so like they connect with you on a human level, right? It wasn't like here's my skills, this is our school, which is basically what most people do in that situation, right? Very, very rarely do people actually open up and be vulnerable and talk about things like that. It just doesn't really happen often.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not, I've learned, because now it's been, a few years, is like I've learned it can be a real conversation stopper, but it doesn't need to be. It's like, it's just part of who I am. And it would be impossible to know who I am or how I feel about life or how I feel about anything without knowing that about me. And because it's important to me that you know who I am and therefore I can connect with you, I need to share that with you and other things, as they come up. I share a lot about mistakes I've made. I share a lot about the fact that every day I'm doing like 30% of my day is stuff I've never done before. And I'm like living, and my entire career I've felt over my skis. And I think just like normalizing that to your point of, we've got like this whole, when people said, are you intimidated talking to so-and-so? And you're like, well, these are just people, talking to people. And that's the thing. I look at like an article in the Harvard Business Review and you're like, oh my God, they totally have their act together. And then you're like, it's probably like the same old, people are moving in, people are moving out, and they have a great PR person. And so
Exactly.
it's just like
exactly what it is as well. Yeah. It's never all roses.
Not that there isn't stuff to learn, but it's like we have our victories, our successes, but they're in the context of like real moving trains. And
yeah, we underestimate as well the impact that has on people in terms of allowing them to, it kind of also gives them permission to be vulnerable and not perfect. So, especially during COVID where, everyone's talking about leading with empathy, right? And before this, those conversations didn't really happen between the managers or many managers and their teams. And this, one of the things that I've always done with the team is be vulnerable. I suffer from anxiety. So there'll be days where I'll just say to the team, I'm not feeling well right now. I'm feeling really anxious. I had a panic attack. I'm going to take a day off. And then, where in the past I would have been like, what are they going to think of me? Are they going to think less of me? And I'd think, I hid it from my wife for like 10 years. Like, so there were times I wouldn't leave the house for a week because I was like, feeling like I was having a heart attack, but I didn't tell anyone. But then now I realize actually that's my biggest strength is my vulnerability, because it brings people closer to me. If they have a problem, they'll come and talk to me. If they're not feeling great, they won't hide it. They'll come and talk to me. And it's just meant that the relationship I have with the team is so strong that I don't think there's any conversation, good or bad, that we can't have. It might not feel good, in terms of getting feedback. So I always say to the team, I would rather you tell me and it's not going to feel great, but I'd rather know than, it be something which is, stopping us from moving forward. Right. And by me doing that and admitting my own mistakes and saying, I'm not perfect, it allows them to do the same thing.
Yeah.
One of the things that I stole from your LinkedIn, and I hope you don't mind, in your bio, is you said, I believe that being real by not over-engineering or over-corporatizing HR, and by finding and supporting great people. And I actually love that, because when you think about HR, I think we've said it quite a few times, we spoke that your opinion is that we tend to overcomplicate things. Is that right?
Yeah. And by the way, I'm like, God, if I would know that quote is going to come back or whatever, I would have worked harder on my LinkedIn profile. I'm like cringing, like, I wonder what it says.
People listening right now are like, what's in my LinkedIn bio? Chris.
Oh yeah. Think twice. Word to the wise. This may come back to you. Yeah. I think it can get really, really complicated. And I don't know if it's driven off of a need to be essential and like add value. So we're like, how do we think about value? Like data, reporting, like programmatizing, and then there's just the, like, in my experience, again, I do value data, I value process, I value communication, thoughtful planning and so on. But I think there are certain situations where you can have a quick conversation, or you can just sit with yourself for a second and go, what should we do here? And you could launch something that takes a month or 2 months and get somewhere. My experience, most often, it'll be to the exact same place, where the simplest thing, the best way to handle it, the right call was, what do I know, given my collective experience over the last 20 plus years, working with people in various situations, even if it's not directly applicable, what does it seem like we should do here? And so many times we've gone off and done these things, and you come back and you're like, well, that confirmed like where we are, but I'm not sure it added a ton of value.
I've done it by then.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of that what would people do thing we talked about a minute ago, but you start with like, what do we think the right course is? And then we can go from there. So if that makes sense.
No, I think you're right. We spend a lot of times doing all of that to justify the decision as opposed to just doing it.
I'll give you an example too. I'll give you an HR example, so I can really show that I am actually an HR leader.
Yeah, people listen. But like, Michelle, really, Chief People Officer at Strava?
Yeah. Like, is she like a mascot? But there are times where you think about, okay, we all have these situations with performance, right? I'm not firing you for cause. You're not grossly underperforming. You're just sort of not living up to the potential of what we think this role could be. And we respect you as a human being. And we reach those points a lot where the manager will just go, I don't know, I've given a ton of feedback. They're not really changing, but it's not that bad, but it's not that good. Like, one of the hardest situations to manage is that kind of mediocre.
Yes.
They're not that bad, but they're not that good. And so we'll come to like, okay, like we could put them on a performance plan. We can, although what do you do if it's kind of just like who they are? It's not, they're not coming to work on time or they're not hitting their sales targets. It's just like, this person isn't bringing the level of optimism or, joy to the work that we would need or whatever. And so it's an example of, you can put them on a PIP, you can go down all these legal roads, you can do this, you can do that. You can also just decide, like, let's help this person land on their feet. So we'll give them a severance. And then in some cases, people will come back and say, well, why are we giving this person a severance? Because they're not, and by the way, this is not Strava specific. This is throughout my career. Yeah. Like, they're not that strong. Why are we giving them 3 months pay? And you're like, you know what? We would be paying them anyway, because they would be sitting here doing the same mediocre level job. So it's like, if you want to make it a financial decision, like, it's just not. And so we're going to pay to have the freedom to treat somebody well. And we wouldn't have known the difference, because if we were a different style team and we weren't trying to get us progressively to where we need to be, we'd be paying them anyway. So that's an example of, like, what's the simplest solution here? And that takes care of people and gets us where we need to go.
What about, we always talk about bringing your full self to work, right? We spoke about it a little bit earlier. Chester Elwin, one of our panelists, was like, I said, what's your part and piece of advice, Chester? And he was like, the same full energy that you bring your full self to work, bring that home with you. Because we tend to come home and we're like exhausted from the day. And yeah, exactly. And it's like, give your wife or your husband a greeting. How are you? But they have the energy and stuff like that. And just like, so it's just like really weird distinction of like, and I'm guilty of it. I'll put my hands up to someone and I'm just like, I'm just a zombie. Because my energy is just gone by that point. But now I'm trying to be more conscious about when I get home is to make the most of that time with, Robin, my daughter, the few hours I have with her before she goes to sleep, we would play and then I have to do that. But when you think about bringing your full self to work, what does that mean to you? How do we do that?
Yeah, you're hitting on a few things there. I mean, the story you just shared about, like, well, what about when you go home, right? Because I think that's where we've potentially skewed. And I'm only, again, in my own little universe here, in my own role, in my own company.
Oh, is what I'm trying to get at as well.
What's that?
Because now it's the same place for many people.
Yeah.
There's no transition. It's the same. You're talking to me before this about how you're doing homeschooling with the kids, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, we could have a whole podcast about the successful I'm being at that. But no, I mean, I think you're talking about like being your full self. I mean, my husband during the course of our conversation came out and is sitting on the couch about 10 feet from us. So like anything I say to you better be true and better be like his version. And so they talk about bringing, being authentic in all areas of your life. But how do you do it? Certainly you have to if you don't have models of people that are doing that, if your boss isn't someone that's doing that, if the people around you aren't doing that, it's harder, right? So there's a level of boldness that you might have to bring to it if you're kind of first of. And I can remember feeling very uncomfortable, like in those first months and years of like really trying, although I didn't have the words for it, but what I was doing was trying to be a more authentic version of myself and be a model for others to do the same. I was trying to make our team meetings, like you talked about with yours, more joyful, more fun. Could we laugh at a team meeting? Could we have like check-ins before we get to the work that make people laugh or that, are, and so I think it's certainly tricky if you're not used to it. Like today, now I'm like, well, how can you not? How could you?
I mean, it seems almost strange.
It becomes, I have an idea. Just be who you are and be that way. A lot of it is trusting yourself, right? Which is something that is very difficult until
psychological safety as well. Around you, everyone around you.
Yeah. And by the way, like I still have moments where I'm like, oh God, I can't believe I just said that. Or I feel like just a hot mess, cruising around the management team. And so it's not I think just because people are authentic or in leadership roles, they don't always feel confident. They don't always feel like I 100% believe in what I just said. You're like, I wouldn't have listened to that, So we're just on our own journey, right? But I think what you hit on about how you show up at home and how, this is real, like for me right now. I think that I am fortunate enough to have this wonderful job that I love at a growing, scaling company. And it is a game on, all, work all the time. If the question is, I used to talk about this even before COVID, but the question on people's minds with the integration of like Slack and like the ability to work all the time, you've got mobile, you've got like ping, 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 ping. The question that people had on their mind always is, should I be working right now? Because we always feel behind, right? We always feel, I joke, like my mother-in-law, I'll talk to her. She'll be like, did you finish all your work today? I'm like, oh yeah, I finished all my work today. And, she just has this mindset of like, maybe what was work like 20 or 30 years ago, when it was very like, I did my 10 things and my checklist is complete.
I don't know if I've ever had a day ever in my whole life that work was done. Like there was nothing else left on. There's like the ticks or all.
Yeah. You start your day in debt, you gain more than you can actually accomplish, and you end your day in more debt than you did when you started it, is usually how work goes. And so there's always this feeling, that question, right? Should I be working right now? If I'm sitting on the couch, should I check my email real quick? Should I make sure there's nothing on fire? Should I? And it's a taxing current that runs through anyone's brain who's working in that kind of an environment. And so if I decide I shouldn't be working right now, like I'm going to consciously decide, I'm going to put my phone in the drawer. There's always the nagging, like, is it okay? Like, what if something's going on? And there's, FOMO and all that, right? But if I am working right now, it's at the expense of these other people who I live with, my family. And so we'll get into these little things where like yesterday was a day where I just could not extract myself. There were some kind of weighty things going on, both positive and negative. There were decisions that needed to be made. And it just felt like a day where I was very unsuccessful in like pulling that back. And so my husband, he's really, supportive and tolerant, but like, as it gets on into the evening, and I'm like, we're in the conversation. I'm like, oh, wait, hold on. Just really obnoxious, kind of either give me a look or say like, you need to withdraw. And I'm like, you don't get it. Like, I'm so important.
With my wife as well.
And so, but it is, at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, of course I do. Of course of course that's a recipe for burnout, no matter how much you love your job. And so I just think we're in murky times because we don't have any visual cues that are like, work is over now.
Yeah. It's not like you're driving home from work and then that's the cut off, right? Or even lunch. Like I said to you today, I sent you an email, which I don't think you saw, saying, Michelle, can we delay the podcast by an hour? I just realized I haven't eaten the entire day. How crazy is that? Literally, I haven't eaten in over 22 hours. literally 22 hours. And I just forgot because I was so busy, just being busy. And, there was no queue. There was no lunch queue. Because normally like your team goes for lunch. It's like the queue to go to lunch. Or again, at the end of the day, they're all gone. Those natural cues throughout the day of when you start, begin, end are gone. And that's something I'm still struggling with. Luckily, I have put, technology in place where like, for example, Slack, everyone in our team's got it set to it turns off at a certain time, right? And it'll only send a message in the morning. So when they wake up, it will then arrive. And then similar with everyone's diaries, I'm like, schedule time to eat and see your kids and spend time with family, schedule time that you're cutting off. But it's taken time. And that's where technology is helping. As much as hindering, it is helping also at the same time. What do you advise your employees then? How are you managing that part and making sure that your managers aren't going too far and, so messaging them at all hours? How have you managed that with employees?
Not very well, to be honest. I think the other thing that's at play is most people who work at Strava love Strava. They love the people they work with. They love the product. They use the product. So there's also this feeling of like very blended, like, I had an idea. I wanted to chat with you about it because it was on my mind, because I'm energized by what I'm doing and I'm really engaged. And, when work doesn't feel as much like work, you're like, I'm just basically talking to my friends ultimately about something I love and use. And so I think we do it to mixed, effectiveness. However, what we try to do is I am a huge believer in people need to hear you and they need to see you. Where I'm currently letting my team down is in the seeing me, like they're not seeing me have any kind of model any true balance right now, honestly. But I do send these messages to the company pretty regularly. And we always try to emphasize like, more important than the work we're doing, more important than Strava is you and how you are doing. And so, we support you and I'll give an example, like, why not turn your why not schedule, you know, a 2-hour break in the middle of your day and go for a walk today? Why not, you know, and I really try to explicitly like name what does this mean? It's not just like, hey, I care about you, but it's like, here's some ideas for what you could do today. And so, of course, it's more powerful when they see, you know, I will. And maybe when I said I'm letting my team down, I mean, 3 weeks ago, I went on vacation and I don't check in at all. So I'll turn off my Slack and email, and they know if something really happened, they could text me, but otherwise they don't hear from me. I'm not peering in on anything. And I think that model of like, that's how you take time off, not this like, you know, bogus, but I think it's modeling, but it's also talking about and normalizing and naming and just continuing to be like, I'm here for you. Like, I know this is hard. I know you're struggling. I know if you're like me, you're feeling heavy a lot. Talk to me about it. You know, just like continuing to name these things and bring them out into the light of day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, just out of curiosity, what is your morning routine then? What does that look like? Because I know you exercise quite a lot. You always put me and Shane to shame on the Strava app. So when it is, you know, because a common question I ask, you know, your peers is, you know, how do you recharge, especially during times, right? It's never been a tougher time. What does your morning routine look like, and how do you recharge the batteries?
Yeah, it's not always perfect or consistent. I'm not much of a morning runner. I love quiet mornings of work. Like most leaders, I spend a lot of time in meetings. And so I need that like, you know, couple of hours where I'm quiet, going through email.
No one's harassing you basically because it's hours in the morning, basically.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So usually I'm full working by around 6 a.m. in the morning, just so I can kind of carve out. Yeah, I used to work stock market hours for years, so I think I'm kind of used to those early mornings. Stock market hours in the Bay Area, meaning you're to work before 6 a.m. in the city. So I was commuting, and anyway, so, but yeah, I love a morning, you know, then just having my coffee and checking in on things, trying to, you know, kind of make a plan for the day. When I'm in a good rhythm, I'll do some meditation in the morning, like short, light, centering. And yeah, and then if I can, like one of the things, you know, we all shifted immediately to Zoom during the pandemic. It was like, now we all have to use video conferencing, which wasn't really a thing that anyone, we were so afraid of like a good old fashioned phone call.
Like 80% of people, no cameras on.
Yeah, totally.
Everyone's on mute.
Now it's like table stakes. You know, you'll meet with a vendor. They're like, let's do a Zoom. You're like, I don't even know you. Like, why do I have to look? Yeah, I don't know.
So true.
So,
yeah.
So I try to, like, for one-on-one meetings with my team, I'll try to go for a walk if I can and just talk to them on the phone.
Walk and talk is so much better. Yeah.
Yep. And that's the way that I, you know, try to recharge. But it is, and then go for a run in the afternoon if I can, or
you're an afternoon runner then, yeah?
Yeah, usually, or on the weekends, you know, go more in the morning. But there's something about because the trade-off for that morning run is feeling like I start the day without being grounded. Like I'm grounded from the run, but I'm not organized in my work. And so there's kind of a...
Just like, this is a random question I've been asking recently, and I'd love to hear your response. How would your family describe what you do for a living?
You can ask them. They're all standing right here. Dom, what do I do for a living? Did you hear? He goes, I don't know. My 5-year-old said, is your job texting people? That was a quote from before. I think how they would describe, they know I work, you know, they think I work at a cool company. And they would probably just describe it as I talk to people. That's my job, is just to talk to people and look at my computer, meaning because I'm always on Zoom. So stare at my computer all day. That's probably how they would describe the huge value that I'm adding in the world.
It's an interesting one because most of your peers, it's the same answer as well. Like there's never, no one really, I think Lego, I was speaking to the chief HR of Lego yesterday, and he was like, my kids think that I'm a master Lego builder. So dad goes to work to create Lego for us and he designs all the Lego. He's like, I'm just going to let them keep thinking that's what I do for a living.
Absolutely. And why not? That's like a superhero job when you're 4 or 5 years old.
Exactly. My dad builds Lego, right? That literally makes for Lego. I was like, yeah, just keep that narrative. That's a good.
Keep that. Oh yeah. When they were younger, when I worked at GoPro, definitely thought like I actually built this camera that we have, you know, but yeah, it's a very vague, right. And even my husband will be like, what do you do all day? Like, what are you all talking about? Why does it take so many conversations?
Yeah, even me, when I have to explain to my friend, I grew up playing ice hockey and skateboarding and breakdancing, right? So this is like when my friends find out what I do for a living, they're so confused, as you can imagine. And they're like, what do you do for a living? And I explain it and they're like, they still don't get it.
Yeah. Let me get this straight. You like just talk to different HR people.
I know, but I have to explain what HR is. That's a whole nother conversation. So you like the people that fire people and
yeah. Oh, like personnel.
Yeah, personnel.
Okay.
Listen, I know you have to run soon as well, so conscious of time. Last question is, if for other, your other peers that are kind of early in their journey, just kind of entering the HR space, looking back at your career, what advice would you give to them? And also, what advice would you give to your younger self now, looking back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll start with that one. Well, I'll start with what advice would I give?
Similar. Yeah.
I think that often when we're unsure of ourselves and we want to be successful, we will lean on markers, external markers of what that might look like. What title did we have? What responsibility was I given? What project was I given? And that will be like, am I on track? And also we will come when people are asking us to contribute to things, we will lean on, if you think about different centers, right? Centers of kind of being, there's action, there's thinking, there's feeling. In corporate settings, we often look to action as being the most valuable. What did I do? What did I achieve? And what I would tell younger folks is that by being who you are the value. Like the more that you lean into presence, judgment, like the work of HR is every conversation, every way you might influence someone. Like it's not about getting the Academy Award at the end of the show. People may never even know that you influence them, or that, the idea that they so brilliantly came up with was this, result of a series of conversations you had with them that helped them see themselves more clearly. And so I think the advice would be, lean into and trust your own judgment, your own ability to connect with people, and become less focused on your achievement, your title, because honestly, it's the things that will be really valued by people will very rarely, like when I talk to people I've worked with before, they very rarely say, what was so incredible about you? That merit cycle that you designed, at that, like, the way you rolled out like that equity refresh plan. Wow, really meaningful. What they say is like, you helped me be better, or I'll always remember like how joyful our team was, or, wow, you're XYZ. It's never really about what I did. And so I think just check how much you value the action and lean more into the who you are. And then I think if you ask me, what advice would I give to myself? It would probably be, you're going to be okay. Like, it's okay. This is, I think there was always this question, and, always this question on my mind is like, can I do something big? Can I be, like looking around and you're like, everybody else was just like born with being awesome, everybody else like clearly understood, they had great decision-making skills when they picked their college, they picked a good major, and I always was like, I fell into this, I fell into that, I fell into that. And I think just trust the process, trust life, and be open to the experiences, and you will be okay. So.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a real pleasure as well. And I promise I'll start running more and catch up on Strava, do my best as well.
Thanks,
for everyone listening, thanks for tuning in as always. If you're new here, please hit the subscribe button on your favorite platform, wherever that may be. Also, go follow Michelle over on LinkedIn if you want to connect. I think that's probably the best place, right? If you want to you. Apart from that, I'll let you get on with your day. Don't work too long.
I'll try not to.
And I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.
Thank you, Chris. Take care. Bye.